In their final year of high school, Theo and Hana were not a couple, not even quite friends. They were quiet observers in a classroom full of noise, two students who shared proximity rather than stories, glances rather than gestures. Their connection was silent, subtle, and entirely real. Theo, a boy of few words and many thoughts, always sat 2 rows behind Hana in literature class. He admired the way she annotated her books, not just underlining, but writing whole conversations with the characters in the margins. He never spoke to her directly, but he would linger near her desk during breaks, pretending to browse his notes as she closed her journal just a little slower. Hana, in turn, noticed how Theo never looked anyone in the eye except when quoting poetry. He had a way of reciting Keats under his breath as if the words belonged to him. She watched how he carefully organized his pens by shade, how he never raised his hand, but always got the top score. She thought about talking to him often, but didn't know what she'd say. Their interactions existed in borrowed moments, the passing of a book, a smile during a shared umbrella walk after school, an accidental brush of hands at the vending machine. And yet, those moments lingered like the scent of rain on concrete. In the final weeks before graduation, the school felt like a clock ticking down. The corridors grew more sentimental, the air heavy with last things. Theo almost told her then, one afternoon after literature class, with the summer light spilling across the hallway floor. He had written a note, folded it in perfect thirds, tucked it behind her borrowed book. The God of small things. But she returned the book before he could say anything, the note untouched, still inside. She smiled and thanked him, and he nodded, as always. That was all. The final day arrived with little fanfare. A school assembly, the kind where emotions hang in the air, but words remain unspoken. Theo stood across the courtyard, watching Hana laugh with her friends. She turned once, their eyes meeting across the space, and something passed between them, familiar, aching, incomplete. He thought about calling her name. He didn't. She walked away with the crowd. He watched her disappear. And so it ended, not with confession or heartbreak, but with silence. A love that never called itself by name, a feeling caught between what was felt and what was feared. They left school like two ships that passed in a morning fog, aware of each other's shape, their nearness, but unable to change course. Years would pass before they met again. But even then, that quiet tether, shy, strange, beautiful, would remain. Some beginnings take years to return, and some names are written softly enough that time doesn't erase them. A decade had passed. Brisbane had changed, grown more vertical, more restless, but its late afternoon light still spilled gold across quiet suburban streets like it had nowhere better to be. Theo stood outside his new rental on a cul-de-sac tucked behind a line of jacaranda trees. His job as an urban designer had brought him here an unexpected reassignment, a necessary shift after years of routine. He was still unpacking when he noticed the neighbor's gate hinges crooked, latch rusted, swaying open with every gust. Without thinking, he walked over, toolbox in hand. And then he saw her. Hana. It wasn't a dramatic reveal, no music, no slow motion, just a quiet moment when time paused. She stepped out with a trash bag in hand, her hair pulled into a messy bun, sleeves rolled up, and a faded university tee clinging to her shoulder. Her eyes widened. His breath hitched. They stared for a second too long. "Hi," she said first, cautious but warm. Theo cleared his throat. "Hey, Hana, right? You're Theo." And just like that, the years folded. Their reintroduction was awkward, and polite neighbors exchanging small talk over creaking gates and overgrown lawns. Hana had been living in Brisbane for years, working as a primary school teacher. She lived alone, still collected second-hand books, and watered her plants every morning before work. Theo learned she still laughed softly when she found something ironic. Hana learned he still sorted everything: tools, books, socks by gradient. In the weeks that followed, they drifted into each other's lives the way shy people do by accident. A cup of sugar borrowed, a delivery signed for, a front yard chat that turned into tea under the stars. They danced around the past like it was fragile glass, neither naming it, both remembering it. There were moments when Theo wanted to ask, "Did you know I wrote you a note?" And moments when Hana wanted to admit, "I used to underline poems just for you." But the words hovered, unspoken, between the clinks of teacups and the occasional shared smile. One night, they sat on Hana's porch. The wind was warm. The city hummed gently in the distance. Hana looked up. "Do you think people change?" she asked, not looking at him. Theo hesitated. "I think they unfold." She nodded. Then silence. He wanted to tell her that seeing her again felt like finding something he didn't know he'd lost. But instead, he asked about her cat. Brisbane moved around them, cars, clouds, days, and yet, they stayed suspended in this strange, gentle rediscovery. The feelings of youth returned not as tidal waves, but as quiet tides, easier now, but somehow also more painful. Because they both knew what it felt like to have something slip away. And this time, they weren't sure if they could name it before it did again. The weeks drifted into a rhythm. On Saturdays, Theo and Hana would meet at the corner cafe. He ordered a flat white, she got an iced chai, always extra cinnamon. They walked along the river afterward, speaking softly about books, the smell of jacarandas. Old classmates they didn't miss. The ease between them felt like walking into a childhood bedroom and finding the air still warm. Yet underneath it all, tension hummed a low, quiet chord. Theo saw the world through frameworks and functions. He planned his life like blueprints, crisp and folded, each day slotted into the next. Hana lived with soft chaos. Her apartment overflowed with plants and books she never finished. She believed in fate. He believed in design. They met at the middle of those lines often, beautifully, but not always. One evening, sitting on the grass by the river, they watched the sun drop behind the Story Bridge. Hana turned to him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd talked more back then?" Theo didn't answer immediately. "All the time." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I used to imagine it, you asking me something, anything, and me saying yes. But we were too quiet. Maybe that was our language." Theo stared at his hands. "Maybe we were just afraid." A beat of silence. It was the beginning of a shift, small but sharp. Hana began seeing someone casually, a man named Julian, kind and funny, who worked in a music shop and asked questions. Theo never thought to ask. Theo tried not to care. He failed. He found himself watching from his window, noting when she came home later than usual. When she laughed a little differently. Their porch talks became more strained. Conversations stumbled over ideology, what it meant to settle, to risk, to love. Hana wanted passion, not plans. Theo wanted stability, not storms. One night, after a dinner that ended in silence, she said, "You always think love is something you have to calculate. It isn't. Sometimes it just is." He didn't know how to respond. Because part of him agreed. And part of him feared that if he let go of logic, he'd have nothing left to hold on to. After that, they stopped walking on weekends. The space between their houses felt wider. She still left her porch light on. He still looked for it. But they were drifting again. In his apartment, Theo found the old note he'd never given her in high school. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink still firm. He unfolded it and read it aloud to no one. It simply said, "I think I've always been falling for you. I just didn't know how to land." He folded it back up. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. And the ache in his chest was no longer just about the past. This time, it was about losing the present too. The distance between their houses had never changed, but now, it felt like miles. Hana's laughter no longer drifted through her open windows. Theo no longer glanced out each morning hoping to catch her watering plants. Their silence had returned, but not the comforting kind. This one came with sharp edges. Theo kept busy, burying himself in drafting projects and emails that meant little. But every time he passed her gate, still crooked, he thought of how easily they had slipped back into each other's orbit and how quickly they'd fallen apart. Then one morning, he saw a moving van across the street. Boxes, books, plants in makeshift crates. Hannah's world disassembled. He froze. He hadn't known. She was heading north and offered to coordinate arts programs for rural schools. A chance to start fresh. It made sense. Hana always moved toward things that felt like hope. Theo walked back inside, sat at his desk, and pulled out the old letter. The one he never gave her. Then he began a new one, no flourishes, no metaphors, just truth. The kind she always asked for. He wrote about Brisbane sunsets, the way her laugh still startled him, the ache of growing up too late. He walked it across the street just after dusk. She opened the door wearing an old hoodie and socks that didn't match. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said, handing her the envelope. She didn't open it right away, she just nodded. "Thank you." That night, Theo couldn't sleep. He sat on his own porch, watching her house. The porch light flicked on. And then, minutes later, hers did too. The next morning, Hana knocked on his door with 2 mugs of tea, hers cinnamon, his plain. "Did you mean all of it?" she asked. "I did." She nodded, tears pooling but not falling. "I wrote you a letter once, too. Back in school. Never sent it." They sat in the quiet, the letter unopened between them. The past felt near but not heavy anymore, like a photograph you can finally hold without shaking. In the days before her move, she kept showing up. A morning wave, a book slid across the fence. Tea on the steps. No declarations, just presence. On her last night in the house, they sat outside in folding chairs. "I don't know if I'm leaving for good," she said. "Me neither," he replied. A pause. "But I'll keep the light on," she added, softly. He reached out, not for her hand, but for the empty space between them, and she filled it with her own. They didn't kiss, didn't promise, didn't need to. Love, after all, didn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it just needed to be known. And even if this wasn't a beginning, it was no longer an ending either. The letter stayed unopened on her dashboard as she drove away the next morning. But the porch light stayed on. And so did something else. The seasons shifted. Spring touched the jacaranda trees and spilled purple petals across the sidewalk. Hana stayed gone for 2 months. Then, 3. Her absence settled into the neighborhood like the gentle quiet after rain. Theo tried to resume life, early mornings, quiet drafting tables, polite neighborly nods, but everything felt a beat off. He hadn't expected her to stay, not really. But he also hadn't prepared for how much space her absence would carve inside him. Then, one morning, her porch was alive again. A ute in the driveway, cardboard boxes, a woman laughing with a delivery guy. Theo blinked from his front step, toothbrush still in hand. She was back. Later that afternoon, she knocked on his door, same as before, holding tea in mismatched mugs. "Didn't feel like home up there," she said simply. The light felt different, the sky too wide. He didn't ask questions, he just stepped aside. They didn't dive into a relationship. Instead, they rebuilt the rhythm. Dinners on Sundays. Walks on Thursdays. A movie now and then where one would laugh and the other would watch. Slowly, they folded the past into the present, not erasing it, but letting it belong. One weekend, Hana brought over an old shoebox. Inside were journals, paperbacks, Polaroids, and a navy notebook from high school. She opened it to a page lined with fading pen ink. In the margin, beside a poem titled, "If Only," were the words, "Maybe someday." Theo read it, then looked at her. She smiled. "Guess this is someday." They didn't say the word love aloud for a while, not because it wasn't there, but because they both knew how delicate it was. Theirs wasn't a fireworks story. It was tea steam in winter. Shared silence. A hand on a shoulder when words didn't fit. He helped her repaint her fence. She taught him how to water her plants without overthinking it. They left books on each other's steps. He built a shelf in her kitchen. She stuck post-it notes on his laptop. They were separate but intertwined, like vines trained to grow side by side. One night, sitting outside, Hana looked up at the stars and said, "I don't think people change completely." "No?" Theo asked. "I think we just grow into the versions we were too scared to be before." He nodded. I think we're still growing. She reached over and took his hand. In the months that followed, there were still disagreements, moments of distance. But now, they had a name for it. And when they couldn't find the words, they found the space instead. The silence between them no longer echoed with absence. It rested, warm and familiar. Some nights, they would sit on the porch long after the city fell quiet, lights glowing from both houses. And if anyone asked how it happened, how two people who never quite fit finally found their way back, they'd simply say, "We just kept the light on."